Hi there, folks. I know that our class has been canceled for the next couple of weeks, so I just wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to go through the process of paraphrase step by step before you launch into an interpretation of a poem. If you look at the assignment and you look at the notes posted in Blackboard for this week, what I've asked you to do is to select a poem of a reasonable length or two poems that might be comparable and begin planning your paper. The first step is to paraphrase, and that means to take the poem and kind of restate its major ideas in your own words. And I tend to go, starting with the title, I work my way through the poem systematically, and I try to just really kind of say what's going on here. So I'm trying to describe what's happening in the poem. I'm not trying to interpret it. I'm not trying to assign any sort of deep meaning to it as much as I'm really just trying to understand what's being described, who is doing what to whom, whatever. So before we jump into interpretation, I wanted to show you a sample poem. I've chosen one of the assigned readings. This is Medusa by Louise Bogan. And this is a poem that's based on a Greek myth. So I started with the title, Medusa. And the title refers to an ancient Greek myth of a beautiful woman who was transformed by the gods so that her hair was turned into a nest of serpents and her looks were deadly, turning all who looked on her to stone. If you've never encountered the myth of Medusa, you can certainly Google it by typing in the myth of Medusa, and you'll find that there is an elaborate history about her. So it seems to me that the poet is already kind of presuming that we know the classical allusion to this Greek myth, and or at least are familiar with the broad contours of the story. Then I start moving through the stanzas, the individual groupings of lines. And the first thing I notice is that somebody is talking to me, a speaker in this poem. And it uses the pronoun I, speaking from a first-person perspective. So I ask the question of myself, who is speaking here? Is this Medusa? Is she the speaker of the poem, or is somebody remembering a visit to this place? And the reason I think it might be a memory of a visit to this place because the next line, part of the line reads, I had come to the house, which suggests past tense or a reason for coming for a visit. The next bunches of lines here, as far as cave of trees, sheer sky, those images suggest secluded grove of trees. In this line, facing a sheer sky, I ask myself, how is sheer being used here? There are probably three meanings to the word sheer. If you think about it, when we say something like, sheer entertainment, we mean totally unadulterated. When we say a sheer cliff face, we're talking about a cliff that has an almost perfectly perpendicular rise and smoothness to it that makes it very complicated to climb. And when we talk about sheer clothing, we're talking about things that are thin, light, diaphanous, almost see-through. So I'm not sure what the speaker means by sheer sky, so I kind of left that in question for myself. These two lines seem to be images of things in motion. So everything moved, a bell hung ready to strike. So imagine a bell with a clapper inside it, and it's ready to hit almost. And the sun and the reflection wheeled by. I presume that the sun is arcing in the sky, and reflection might be the shadows that are caused as the sun moves through the sky. In the next stanza, when the bare eyes were before me, whose eyes are looking at that speaker at that moment? Is this Medusa looking at the speaker? And the hissing hair held up at a window seen through a door? The stiff bald eyes, the serpents on the forehead formed in the air? So I commented on that. I said, I'm guessing that the speaker is witnessing the appearance of Medusa, which is why she can see these details. In other words, why would Medusa comment on her own features indirectly? Why would Medusa be speaking of herself in the third person, or saying I and me, and then talking about the features of her own hair and so forth, as if they were somehow separate from her? So that was just a little confusing for me. So I noted that to myself, and I said, I think the speaker is witnessing the appearance of Medusa. This is a dead scene forever now. Nothing will ever stir. the end will never brighten it more than this, nor the rain blur. And I noticed that there was a change in the poem. These two stanzas that I've just highlighted are different from the preceding stanzas because these groups of images suggest interrupted actions. So those things we heard about, the bell that was about to clap, the sun in the sky, all these things that were in motion are now kind of stuck in time. And the other thing that I noticed was that the verb tense changed. The first two stanzas are in the past tense. They happened in the past, like a memory. These two stanzas that are highlighted are in the present tense. This is a dead scene. Nothing will in the future, right, will ever stir, right? Nothing, the end will never brighten it more than this. So all these things have potential, but they're never going to change. And then here, last stanza, I shall stand here like a shadow under the great balanced day, my eyes on the yellow dust that was lifting in the wind and does not drift away. My comment here is still in the present tense. The speaker seems to be caught in an everlasting present, or perhaps in the memory of the last thing he or she saw. So here's my paraphrase. Here's my re-explanation of the poem to myself. In this poem, a visitor seems to have come to the home of Medusa and seen her with his eyes. Consequently, he seems to have been turned to stone and frozen there for eternity. His eternity seems to be composed of the last things he saw or he remembers right before he was turned to stone. And these things are frozen too. And I put them in parentheses just to kind of note them for myself. These were the last things the guy saw before he was turned to stone. Water falling, a bell about to ring, the sun in the sky, grass growing, yellow dust. And these things are never going to change. So he's permanently frozen there, frozen in this memory, frozen in this scene. I think that's my theory of what's going on in the poem. This is the first stage of writing a poetry paper, is identifying a poem that you are interested in, one that you feel is a sufficient length, and one that you can probably interpret, with some idea of what's going on. If you pick a poem that you say, I have no idea what's going on in this poem, and I'm just guessing at what some of these things mean, it'll be a very frustrating experience. So paraphrase is the first step. Once you've selected a poem, you say, I gotta kind of tame the poem for myself and just understand what's happening before I start interpreting. Interpreting means making some scholarly guesses about what these ideas mean. So I'm not trying to assign any meaning to them at this point. I'm only trying to say what I think is happening. Assigning a meaning to these things, in other words, what theme does Louise Bogan seem to be suggesting about, for example, memory or women or the Gorgon or Medusa? That's a separate set of skills that I'll get to in another demo. So I hope this has been helpful, and I hope this is where you're at in your process. If you have questions or if you'd like to share a draft with me at this stage, by all means, please feel free to email them to me. Take care.